Hey, Survey of Art, we're going to go over what your next assignment is. So what have we been practicing watercolor and color theory for Zentangle watercolor? So you might have heard of Zentangle before. Basically, it's just doodling with a purpose. So let's take a look. So it's an easy method of creating really nice images from repetitive patterns. So pattern is a principle of design. And it's a fascinating way of art that's just kind of fun. It's relaxing. It's nice focus, but like easy, smooth creativity. So we'll be using repetition or pattern. Sometimes they're kind of labeled as the same thing in the principles of design. To create that, let me move my face over this so you can see better. We'll be using line, color, and space to create that. So, like I said, we're going to use patterns. So it's a regular arrangement of alternated or repeated elements. So like shape, line, and color. Oh, look at that. So there's like a bunch of this little person in a row. There may be variation in that pattern, but we're going to use line, color, and space. And the biggest thing in space that we're going to be talking about is like down here, positive and negative space. So what will we use and what will we make? We're going to use the Sharpies that are in your kits. You should have like a really fine tip Sharpie in there, and then, well, this is an ultra fine tip, and then a fine tip Sharpie. And you can use other thicker Sharpies if you have them at home. They just have to be permanent because you're going to be applying a water on top of this. If you use anything that's water-based, it's going to bleed like crazy. So test it out before you try something else. And we'll be using watercolor and then watercolor paper. So some things we're going to use, color theory, we'll use line, we'll talk about positive and negative space when we're creating them. They can be abstract images, meaning like there's no representation whatsoever, or they can have familiar objects in them. So here's an example of abstract design. There's design within design. There's nothing that really represents anything specifically. Like you might draw inferences from this, like, oh, I can guess this looks like a spike or something, but it's just good old-fashioned doodling. This next one actually has a little bit of representation in it. So the basis is like a really enlarged flower, and then there's design within that. Again, it's still abstracted, but there was a representation of something that was an inspiration for this. So you can go either way. You could also do designs around an image as well. So you've got the eye in the center here, and the designs are all created around that. So you do have to do something interesting. You have to create at least 5 different kinds of Zentangle design, and you don't have to like create them on your own, like I know how to do this. I'll give you ones that you can choose from, or you can alter, or you can make your own. But it should be done in an aesthetically pleasing way, meaning it should look nice and not basic. Like you want to have good composition. This one is just a bunch of lines drawn across the paper filled in with design. Not interesting to look at. We're also going to use some of those watercolor techniques you've learned. So you will apply at least 3 of those. That could be a flat wash, it could be lifting, it could be a gradient. If you have like salt or rubbing alcohol at home, it could be those. You could use the crayon resist, wet on wet, all of those different techniques, but you need at least 3 of them. You are also going to use color theory. So you have to choose a color theme for your project. So you could go with like how we talked about warm colors, cool colors. You could go with something that's monochromatic or analogous. You could do complementary, or you could go off into like one of those other ones we didn't get too deep into. So here are some examples of cool color schemes done in like a watercolor with a similar style doodling. Got some warm colors, complementaries. This is almost even a split complementary. Cool colors maybe against warm colors, so you're kind of mixing color themes. That I one is Roy G. Biv, so it goes from the red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. You could mix like a really strong contrast between black and white and color. So they didn't actually color any of their Zentangle in. They only painted their representational image. So like I said, you could do something where it has a very abstracted image, like this is clearly a lady and her hair is done in the Zentangle. This could all be maintained as a watercolor. or you can maintain that just positive and negative space of just black and white. So these are just ideas that I found online that you could like kind of look through to see if that's something that you're interested in and doing something representational, or if you want to just go straight all abstract. You could include words too. I've had someone do something similar like this that was like fine balance. Oops, the moon one is kind of cool. My daughter's middle name is Moon, so I'm always kind of like attracted to that kind of stuff. Here's a past student example, and I will also post more student examples for you too before you actually get started, so you can get a better idea of what other people have done. But again, they left a decent area of space just for watercolor, so don't feel like your entire page has to get filled in with Zentangle. You have the opportunity to add watercolor to it. And this one didn't leave any white on the paper, and again, that's an option for you as well. Again, like I said, consider the positive and negative space. Make sure you do leave space for watercolor to actually fill in, or maybe maintain some of your whites. So some goals: precision and quality, stay focused, don't rush. This has to be like a really concentrated kind of doodling. If you just kind of like haberdashy do it, it will show in your work and you will probably mess up. This is meant to be done in Sharpie and not pencil first. So you can kind of practice your layout on some of that printer paper first in pencil, but when you go onto your final piece of watercolor paper, it should only be done in Sharpie. So no erasing. So if you make a mistake, make it a happy tree. Bob Ross that. Like, oh, this was supposed to be a line this way, I'll just fill it in and make lines this way. So just kind of go with the flow if something messes up and doesn't end up the way you exactly wanted it. Think about compositions. Think about that word aesthetics, like making something pleasing to the eye. So repetition, size variation. So instead of making a bunch of bubbles on your page, make some bubbles little, some big, some inside the other bubbles. Consider working off symmetry or off center or in symmetry. Is there balance? Does like one side have too much and one side doesn't have enough? Make sure that you're kind of weighting things out. Think about shape or creating texture. Your space has to be broken up into at least 5 distinct areas of design, though. So you have to have a minimum of 5 different kinds of Zentangle design. What I'm going to post for you next, and I'll go over, is your practice. So we'll practice Zentangle design first, so you're not just like thrown into it. Then we'll create our design on watercolor paper using Sharpie, and then the last thing will be adding the watercolor to that. Let's see on my computer here where that assignment is. How do I do full screen view? It's like web layout. Oh, big. Okay. So what we're going to be doing is a practice. So you're going to choose 5 Zentangle patterns to practice. I don't like this layout. This seems like so weird. We'll just zoom in. Like, oh geez. Oh gosh. I should have made this PDF. Okay. Zentangle practice. So what you're going to do, my computer's all weird too. Off topic. You're going to choose 5 Zentangle patterns to practice on the printer paper that's provided to you. So don't do some watercolor paper. And you're going to do 5 squares, and they should be about 1 inch by 1 inch. You can go a little bigger if you wanted to, but just don't go smaller than that. And if you want to use your ruler, great. If you don't, just like kind of eyeball what's, an inch by an inch. So you're going to draw a square like this guy here, and then you're going to copy a design into here. You're going to choose those designs from the pages below. So I gave you 2 whole pages of different kinds of design that you could choose from to practice. And then what you're going to do with those 5 designs that you've practiced, you're going to make a 4x4 square, and you could go bigger if you wanted, and you're going to integrate those 5 or use those 5 you've made into that design. Think about positive, negative space, think about balance, think about all those different things that were in the slideshow when you're creating this. This isn't by no means your final design, but it's just kind of getting used to the process. You should do this in Sharpie. If you're doing it on that printer paper, make sure there's a protective barrier underneath, because like Sharpie bleeds onto the other side. So just like be careful about that. So like this is my example, and like it does bleed through what you're working with. So here are those different designs that you could use. And then here's an example of how you could lay it out. Your squares don't have to touch each other. They could be, I just traced my ruler, but they could touch each other if you want. So here are my 5 designs. They're not exactly like the ones that are in there. Don't worry about being perfect. Like, I kind of messed this one up right away, so I just kind of went with it and changed it a little bit. It's really just practicing making positive and negative space, how to use a Sharpie, how do they bleed, how do they work. Not everybody's like worked in Sharpie too much. And then I used those 5, zoom out a little bit, to create this design. So again, I used them as an inspiration, but I didn't make exact replicas of it. This one I used as my inspiration for the center. This one I used as my inspiration to draw my viewer back into the middle. This one I used my inspiration to draw back from this side because I thought it was really going off the page just in one direction. I used these guys kind of all over the place instead of clumped together. And then I used the bubbles from here in a couple different areas. I could fill this in a little bit more. I like the amount of positive and negative space because I have areas that could just be literally watercolor. So this assignment is going to be due on Monday. So you'll have today and tomorrow as complete work days. And then over the weekend, I will start doing some grading on the color theory notes and the watercolor technique notes. They are different things. Some of you have turned them in as just color notes to the color or to the watercolor techniques. 2 separate assignments, so make sure you're going through Google Classroom and checking which each assignment, what the instructions are for each. So Monday, I will talk about more about the requirements for the project and give you some better examples of student examples from the past. So if you have any questions, let me know. There is that Google Meet tomorrow between 10 and 11 if you want to go over anything, if you feel like you're missing anything. Just hit me up. I'll talk to you guys later.